So can you just click on that button?
Yeah, I clicked on the
Yeah.
recording button.
Yes. So now it's recording.
Yeah.
Okay. So in today's class, we will talk about how to start with object-oriented app, because object-oriented app is going to be the heart of WebInfo. Whatever you're going to do here is will be based on Oops app. Okay. So let me start with the Oops app introduction, and we will also we will talk about in details how to create a classes, methods, interfaces, typecasting, all these concepts. Any idea about Oops app department?
I think some noise is coming. Okay.
Any idea about Oops app?
Yeah, I'm having idea. Yeah.
Okay. So let me start with the creation of a class. Can you tell me the key code to create the class?
AC24.
Yes, very good. So we'll start creating our first class here in SV24. So what is basically a class is? Abhijit, can you please mute yourself? There's a lot of echo coming from your side. Yeah, thank you. So what is a class? Class is nothing but it's a template used to create objects of similar types. Sometimes we also call the class as a real world entity, whether you say a student, an employee, a company, all these things are example of classes. A classes consist of three important ingredients. The first part of a class is called attribute, where we put all our variables. They are also known as properties. Second part of the class is called as methods. They are also known as behaviors or functions. And the third important part which class is consist of is called events. So these are all the three things which we will be having inside a class. So whenever you create an object of a class, the memory will be created for the attributes. So I will first of all show you how do we represent a class in a UML notation. So what is a UML notation? Any idea about that? What is UML notation?
No.
Okay, UML stands for Unified Markup Language. It's basically used to represent a class or anything for that matter in the software industry. It's a representation of objects in software world. So what happens is in software there are different technologies like Java, .NET, ABAP, Oops ABAP, COBOL, lot of languages are there. So what is the common understanding between all the software developers is called UML, which represents your entities in a graphical form so that anybody can understand it. It's a common notation which is used across the world and in the software industry. So how do we represent a class in UML notation? So to represent a class, there are three sections in UML. So this is how we represent a class, like a block. Inside this block, you will have three sections. So your first section is nothing but is the name of the class. Next section is the attribute section, where you actually represent your attributes. And third section is called method section, where you represent your methods of the class or behaviors of your class. So that's my third section. So that's how we represent a class in the UML notation. Now coming to attributes and methods, there are two very important aspects of an attribute or method. First is called visibility of an attribute or method. So there are three types of visibility of an attribute or method. First is called public, second is called protected, third is called private. So these are all the three different types of visibilities we have for an attribute or method in Oo1. So what is the difference between public, protected and private? Let me put it into a table so that we can easily understand the difference between all three of them. So the visibility basically affects the accessibility of your attribute. So where all you can actually access the attributes in what are all the different parts of software, you can actually access these attributes which are there in your class. So on the one side we have public, protected and private. On the other side we have within the class, in the child class, and another is we have in programs. So public are the attributes and functions which are accessible within the class. They are also accessible in the child classes. What is a child class? If I create an inheritance by reusing a class, I can build another class actually. So we will see the inheritance concept in our next class. We can actually build the classes based on other classes. That's called inheritance. So the class which is built using another class is called inherited class. It's called child class. So we can access the public attribute in the child class also. Then in the program as well. Then protected attributes. We can access the protected attributes within the class, in the child class, but we cannot access them in the sub-programs. So let's say I have a program which is using my class. I cannot access the protected attribute in the program directly. Same thing applies for protected methods. Then coming to private attributes, I can only access the private attributes and methods within the class. I cannot access them in the child classes, neither in the programs. Any doubt about visibility property? Any one of you? No doubt?
No
Okay.
doubts. Yeah.
We will see a practical example where I'll actually show you what is accessible, what is not. Then coming to the instantiation property, which is another aspect of a method and attribute. So there are two ways of instantiation. First is called instance attributes or methods. Second is called static attributes and methods. So what is an instance and what is a static? So first of all, let's understand what is instance. So the word instance means the object of the class. The word instance means object of the class. It's nothing but object of the class. So object of the class actually represents the memory. So whenever you have a class and you create object of the class, it represents the memory allocated by the class. Now, instance attributes will have different memory allocated in different objects. Let me take one example. Suppose I have a class and the class has attributes as, or let's say class name is my plane class, zcl underscore plane. This is my class, and in this class I have attributes like uh, width and height. So a plane is actually an object. It has two attributes called width and height of the plane. Now using these attributes, I can decide what is the width of the plane and what is the height of the plane. Now can you tell me, will all the plane in the world will have same height and width?
No.
No. You will have different height and width value for every plane in the world. So that is why we say when we create the object out of this plane class, let's say I created two objects, object number 1 and object number 2. Both the objects can have different value of width and height. So first object, let's say plane 1, is having width value as 100 and height value as 80. Then I have my plane 2, which may be a jumbo jet, jumbo plane. It can have a width of 200 and height as 90. So both the plane objects are having different value of my attribute which I created. In such cases, these attributes should be instance attributes because plane 1 and plane 2 are two instances of your class, and for every instance the value of the attribute is differing. So you will create it as an instance attribute so that you can store different values in different objects for the plane. You got it. What is instance attribute?
Yeah.
Yeah. So again I will repeat, an instance attribute is an attribute for which the memory will be created per object. So for every object the memory will be created for instance attributes. Now what is static attribute? Static attribute is an attribute. Okay, let me note down this for your reference. Memory will be created per object. Is used when we need different values per object. Then coming to static attributes, the value of the variable will be same for all the objects. For an example, I have planes in the world. Can a plane fly without wings? In the world, have you seen any plane which can fly without wings?
No.
No. Also, the number of wings are always same for all the planes, right?
Yeah.
So number of wings is an attribute which is always same for all the planes, right? So
Yep.
I would rather create it as a static attribute. So whenever you have a static attribute, whatever value you will have for that attribute, it will be same for all the objects. So if I have a static attribute here, let's say number of planes, and I have value as 2. So here in this also you will have same value for the object. Both the objects will contain same value of this. line question. So both the objects are actually containing same value for the attribute. That's called static attribute, wherein you want all the objects to contain same value. That's your static attribute. Any questions till now about visibility and instantiation of attributes and functions?
Can we change the static attribute value in the instance?
Okay, we can actually change it, but it depends on requirement. If you feel that your memory is being wasted, that time you will go for static attribute. See, number of wings are always going to be same in the planes. So
Okay.
by keeping it as a instance attribute, the memory will be allocated per object. So every object will have the memory created for number of planes.
Yeah. But
But number of plane is an attribute which will have the same value for all the objects. Why to waste the memory for object creation, right?
yeah.
That is the reason we go for static.
Okay. But is it a constant? We cannot change the value of the static attribute, or
We can change the value of static attribute. Very good question. Now this brings me to the third type called constants. So constant is also a similar concept, you know. Constant is something which will have same value for all the objects.
okay.
But the difference between static and constant is we cannot change the value of constant. We cannot change the value of constant at all during our programming. So in the coding, I can change the static attribute value still, but I can't change the value of a constant.
Okay.
Okay. Static attributes, the purpose is just to have the same value for all the objects, but it doesn't mean you can't change the value. You can actually change the value. It is not a fixed value.
Okay.
It's a variable which is shared variable between all the objects.
Yeah. If we change in one instance, it will reflect the value in other
Reflect
instance.
in other instances.
Okay.
Exactly. It's a
Okay.
shared variable.
Okay.
But constant is something which is shared constant. It is having a fixed value.
Okay.
Okay. Abhijit, actually your line is muted. If you have any questions, you can unmute your line and ask. Okay. So that's about my instantiation and class. Now, how do we represent static, instance, all these things in the UML notation? So let me put a UML notation for a class. So let's have a class here. I want to take an example of a plain class. So the first section is my class name. So I will say class name is ZCL underscore plane. Is my class name for aeroplane. Now can you name some of the attributes of an airplane?
Yeah. Whatever. Height, width, same.
Height, width, number of seats,
Yeah.
your
No.
color of the plane,
Color
wings,
of the
engine
plane.
size, fuel tank capacity,
Yeah.
cargo capacity, all these are attributes.
Yep.
So all these are instance attributes, right?
Yeah.
Because every plane can have different fuel capacity, every plane can have different passenger capacity, it can have different color, they may belong to different airline companies. So all these are instance attributes. Now let me create a couple of attributes. Let's say I want to create first public attribute. So public attributes are represented using symbol plus. Protected are represented using symbol hash, and private are represented using symbol minus. So let me create some couple of attributes here. I create a public attribute for width. then a public attribute called height, then a probably private attribute called color. So these three are my attributes of a plane. Two of them are I created public, one just private. So this is just an example. There is no reasoning behind why I kept color as private, why I kept height as public. There is no reasoning behind it. I just created it for an example. Now, as I mentioned, the color attribute is something which you cannot access in the program at all, neither in the child classes. So if I want to read the value or change the value of my private attribute, there is a workaround which is available. I can create public methods. So I say set method for setting the attribute of color, and a get method to read the value of color. Set is to set the value of my color attribute, and get is to get the value of my color attribute. In the set, actually, I will be passing the input value called color, so it will have an input parameter. You guys are aware of function modules, right? Where we have input, export. Similarly, a method will behave. Method will also have input parameters, export parameters to read and set the values of the attribute. Now get color method will have an export parameter called color, which will provide me the value of color stored in my class. So I'll be creating two methods. So the representation of a method is represented by parentheses. So parentheses represents that it's a method. But attribute will not have parentheses like this. It will just be represented like this. Let me also have, a static attribute like a public static attribute which says maybe something called light, plain light. All the planes will have a red light at the bottom of the plane, which indicates that there is a plane flying above. So it's a static attribute which is there in all the planes, plain light. So created is a static. Static attributes are represented using underline. Okay. So that is my class representation. Now we are going to develop this class in SE24. Any questions before we move on to SE24? Any questions from any one of you?
No. Can we ask Abhijit, is he hearing the session or?
I think he is able to hear us. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Let me go to Yuta.
Are you able to hear me?
So now, yeah, Vijit, we can hear you.
Yes.
Any questions from your side?
No.
Okay. Super. So you guys can mute again yourself, not a problem, and then we will move on and create our class. So I go to SE24 T code to actually create a class now. So here what I'm gonna do is create a new class. So I'll enter the object type, object name as ZCL underscore airplane. That's the class I want to create, airplane class. Click on create button. System gives you a pop-up. So I say airplane class. Now in Oo1 there are different types of classes which we can create. So usual ABAP class is just a normal class. Exception classes are used for exception handling in Oo1. Persistence classes are used for database persistence classes which can store some values in database buffers. Test classes are used for unit testing purpose. Then we have an attribute called final attribute, which represents that I cannot inherit this class further. So if this attribute is checked, I cannot create a subclass of my airplane class. So let me put this attribute meaning here in the PPT for your reference. So it will tell whether class can be inherited further or not. So if it is unchecked, you can inherit the class. If it is checked, you cannot inherit the class further. So that's about my final attribute. I click on Save button, local object. Now you can see I've got my attributes and methods section. There are other sections also. We will talk about them, but not in detail because our purpose is to learn the bare minimum OOPS app for WebIntro. I will not cover in detail about the classes because that comes under OOPS app. I will just cover the introduction of OOPS app which is needed for learning WebIntro. So let's go to attributes tab and create our attributes here. So first is my width attribute. Come to the level, press F4. You can see the three levels which I just explained you: instance, static, and constant. So can you tell me what should be my width of type? Anybody?
Instant of attribute.
Instance, very good. Because my class object will have different values, every object will have different value of width. Every plane can have different width. Next is my visibility. I press F4 there. As per the UML diagram, I wanted it to be public. So there are three visibility attributes: public, protected, and private. I select public and put the associated type as int1. You can also put a data element here. Let's say material number MATNR, or I have a field sorter number VBELN. All that I can put here in the types. So this is actually a graphical notation. In the background, what happens is SAP will generate the code like this: data, width, type, int1. Like this, SAP will generate a code in the background for your variable which you declaring here. Next is my height attribute. This is also an instance public attribute I am creating of type int1. Then I am coming to my color attribute. It's an instance but private attribute of type char 10. Press enter button. All three attributes are now part of my class. I go to method and create a set color method, set underscore color, to set the value of my attribute. So it's an instance public because I want to access this method in my program. That's why I made it public. So I will say to set the attribute color. Then I have a get method, get color, which is basically to read the value of color attribute. Select the set color, click on parameter. See, this is just a function module. Imagine this is a function module. So every function module will have import, export parameter. Similarly, here I can have for every method different import and export parameters. So first I select my set color method, create one input parameter. The naming convention for input parameter should be I underscore your parameter name. So I say I underscore color. That's my parameter name. In the type, you will see the types of parameters I can create. Importing, which is to import the value to the method. Exporting, to export out the value from the method. Changing is to change the value. And returning, I will explain you in the next session. What is the difference between exporting and returning? Returning also is used to export the value out, but it is used in a different way. We will talk about returning in next chapter. So right now I want to create it as an import. So select importing of type integer1. Go back to the methods. Select the next method and create an export parameter for this one. E underscore color export parameter of type integer 1. Go back. So you can see here I have created two methods with one encoding and one exporting parameter in each one of them. Now I double click on set color method to implement the method, to write the code inside the method. On the top you can see it showing me the color attribute, which I created as a parameter. Now I have my class attribute along in the attribute section, right? In the attribute section we created a color attribute. Here it is. So whenever user calls the method set color, user will pass the color of the plane to me in the importing parameter in this method. So from my program I'll call this method, pass the color value. That color value will be received in I underscore color attribute. And I want to set that to my class. So within the class, if I want to represent the object of my class, I use a keyword called me keyword. Let me note down. So I say within a class, if we want to represent the object of class itself, we use keyword called me keyword. So it's an object of self class, me keyword. In the C programming, if you have learned, there is something called this pointer in C. This pointer is nothing but object of current class itself within that class. So I'll show you the advantage of using these keywords. So I say me and then say arrow. Arrow is to access the attributes and methods of a class using object. So me is an object of current class and I type arrow and then I press Control space key. So whenever I press Control space, you can see it is showing me all the attributes and methods which are available in my class. So I want to change my color attribute value. So the ones which are there in the blue color are the attributes and the ones which are there in orange color are the methods. So I say color is equals to whatever value user has passed. Now I'll tell you one important thing. People may ask you in interview that why we use me keyword. It's good to use me keyword, but why? In the method, why you are using me keyword? So the answer should be, let me declare a variable here called color. Now, if you're not using the me keyword, how will your class know that we want to change the color value this or we want to change the attribute of class? So the ABAP will get confused whether you want to change the value of your local variable or class variable. So what ABAP will do, it will always change the value of your local variable, not the class variable. That is why we use the keyword to tell explicitly that I want to work with a class attribute, not with a local attribute color. Understood the difference between me keyword and without using me keyword?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So avoid such situations, we use me keyword. Also, it gives you a help. When you press Control space, it will tell you all the possible values which you can enter. That is also an advantage of using me. So that's my value setting. I set the value of color into my class. I go back and get the color this time. So I have my color here. So E underscore color, which is equal to new word. Control space and all my attributes are visible. So as I mentioned, whether it is a public, protected or private, all the attributes will be available in the class. You can see here within the class, the method belongs to my same class. So within this class, I can access any attribute, whether it is public, private or protected. So color is a private attribute. I'm still able to access it within the class because I am inside the class right now. The method belongs to same class. So this is an opposite process where we return the value of color, which is a private attribute. Now we will activate our class. So say activate. Class is now active. Any questions till now about creation of a class?
No.
No.
No. Okay, let's create a program now to create the object of this class and change the value, read the value and set the value of color. So next what we're going to do is I have a class here and I'm going to have a program in here. So this program is going to instantiate my class, the objects of this class, and using the objects of this class, I'm going to do some operations, basically calling the methods of my class. So in a program to create the object of the class, how do you create the object of the class? So there are two steps in order to create object of a class. Let me show you those two steps. Step number one is to declare the object of the class. How do we declare the object of a class? We use data keyword, data. LO stands for local object, object name, whatever object name you want. Type ref2 class name. That's how we declare an object of a class. This method will just declare an object pointer. It will not create the memory. So this is just declaring of an object pointer like this. So this is how system has created an object pointer. Next, step number 2, create the object. So creation of an object will actually allocate the memory. It allocates the memory for the object. So when it allocates the memory, it will actually have memory like this. So now your pointer is pointing to the memory. So you can access the methods of this object and attributes of this object using this object pointer, LO object. It's a handler of your object. And this is actually the memory by which will be allocated when you say create object method. Object name, like this. This is the syntax. So using this, we will be creating our objects of the class and allocating the memory for objects. Then to call an attribute or method, we use object name, hello underscore object, arrow symbol, an attribute name or method name. With the methods, we use parentheses, but with attributes, we don't use parentheses. So that's how we access an instance attribute. So I would say call an instance attribute or method. Now for static attributes, I'm telling you the syntax actually. For static attributes and methods, I actually don't need to create the object of a class because they are static. I can directly access them with the class name. So let's say my class name is ZCL, or let's say it is class underscore name. Equals to greater than is the symbol to access the static attributes or methods. I can say attributes or methods. So that's how we access static attributes or methods of a class. Let's go to the system and try these things in the system now. So I come to the system, that's my class name, go to SE38 to write a report program. So I'm going to create my first program here. So let me put my class name in the presentation for your reference. That's the class name which we have created. Now I'm creating a program. Let's say Z airplane X. That's the program I want to create. So just copy this, put in the name over there, and create the report. Create an executable program and say save. So these are all the core concepts of Oo1 which we will be using throughout our web intro programming. So that is the reason you need to be comfortable with that. And after the 4 classes of Oo1, you will realize that you have learned a lot. It will really help you even in your ABAP project, because most of the latest SAP products are based on Oo1. So now first step, I will declare my objects. Step 1. Declare objects, state data, hello plane 1, type ref to ZCL underscore airplane is my class name. Next is hello plane 1, plane 2, sorry, type ref to ZCL airplane. So I have 2 objects declared first of all. Now I create memory for these 2 objects. Step number 2, actually creating the object. So I say create object hello plane 1 comma hello plane 2. So I have created both objects together using create object command. So now after this step number 16, step number 2, your memory for both the objects is created. So your instance attribute has got different memory for both of them. Now probably I also create some variables for my color attribute, say LV or some parameters. So color 1 type 10, then color 2 type 10. I declare variables also, LV underscore color 1 type 10 and LV underscore color 2 type 10. Super. Now let's use the object. I use the object, press arrow and press Control space. Now as soon as I press Control space, system shows me all the attributes and methods available. So can anybody tell me why the color attribute is not visible here?
It's a private.
Super, it's a private attribute. That's why it is not available. That's what we have learned. Private attributes are not accessible within the programs. They are only accessible within the classes, or within the self class actually. But we have a workaround. We have a setter and getter method for color attributes, which is private. So if you set color, whatever value user will pass in the parameter, I will send it to the method like this. So that's how we can send a value to the color. Exporting parameter. We had an import parameter called color. In that we have sent the value. The same code you can actually generate using pattern. So go to pattern, ABAP object patterns, say OK. Enter the instance name here, LO underscore plane 1, ZCL underscore create plane. Go to method, press F4. You can see it is showing you the methods which are available. Select the set color method and click on OK. So system will automatically generate the code for you. You can see like this. So there is no difference in both the things. Functionality wise both are same. Only little bit difference in syntax actually. So some people will write the code like this because I am used to this technique, that's why I write like this. Some people will use to write like this. Okay. So don't worry about the syntax part, both are actually same. So I have set the color attribute for plane 1. Same thing I'll do for plane 2, LO underscore plane 2. Set color as color 2, which I've got from parameter. Now after setting the value, I'll just read the value from the object just to make sure whether value is set or not. So say get color attribute, or get color method I will call. It imports the value to my program. So that I will pass into a variable like this. Same thing for object 2 I'll do. To read the value of the color attribute. And now I'll print both the values. So I'll say write color of plane 1 is LV color 1. And then my color of plane 2 is LV color 2. Take it. Check it. Oh, there is something wrong in the type compatibility.
Yeah, I think you declare as the integer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Import parameters, export parameters.
Let's go and check. So you can see ABAP will help us to resolve the errors also, not just that we can generate the code.
Yeah.
So very good. We have created the color as an integer, but actually it's a character. So let me change it. The import. We got it very fast, man. Super. Super. So it's a character. Okay, this. It got saved. Let's try now. Syntax error also got resolved. Let's activate the code. So execute. I enter the color of my first plane as red, next as yellow. Let's execute, and you can see the values are now stored in the object. That is the reason it is giving me the value when I do a get method for both the planes. And both the planes having different values stored because color is an instance attribute. So per object the memory for the color is allocated and both are having different values stored. That's why, because it's not a static method or attribute. So let me create a static method now. So probably in a plane, what could be a static method is a common functionality to all the planes. Let's say calculate fuel efficiency. There's a static public, or I would say calculate This method can be used to calculate how many more miles I can travel with the current capacity of fuel. That's what this method will do. It is common for all the planes, right? How many miles I can travel with a given fuel. It's common. So the input to this will be I underscore fuel left or fuel quantity, current fuel quantity which I have, let's say integer 4, and I underscore average of mile per gallon of fuel. So this is finally going to give you an export miles. How many miles you can travel. So export so let's say my plane average is 5 miles per gallon of fuel. And I have total fuel left as 20 gallons. So simple formula E underscore miles is equals to I underscore fuel quantity, whatever fuel I have, total fuel multiplied by how many miles I can travel with a per gallon fuel, I underscore average. That's my formula. It will be global. It will be same for all the planes. Whatever planes you will see in the world, the formula will be same. So that's why I created as a static method. It is not specific to plane, right? To calculate distance formula. Let's go back to the program. Just create a variable here. Probably parameters for average and fuel left. Type integer 4 and average. Type integer 4. Create a variable which will contain your miles. How many miles you will be able to travel with this amount of fuel in 4. So what I would do is just call the static method. So can anybody tell me how can we call static method? I just told you.
To class name.
Yes, very good. Directly with the class name, we can actually call the static method. So I'm going to use my class name equals to greater than symbol control space. You can see that it's only showing me the calculate distance because that's the only static method I do have. Only one static method. So press enter. System automatically generates the code for you here. Similar way we will be doing in web intro when we go there. We'll generate the code there like this. Pass the fuel laps and average of the plane and receive the miles. How many miles you'll be able to travel with this plane. So I say right, then fly. That's my out. Time for testing. Go for execute. Enter the color as red, then yellow. Fuel left is, let's say 20 gallon of fuel I am left with, and I can go 5 miles per gallon. So can anybody guess the answer? What should be the number of miles I can travel with this fuel?
100.
Super. You can see you can fly only up to 100 miles with this amount of fuel left. And that's common by the way for all the planes. So I don't need to create it as an instance method. It's a static functionality, common for all the things, all the objects. Very good. Any questions in this part so far, whatever we've done? Attributes, methods, classes, objects, static, instance, public, private, protected. Any questions?
No questions.
Okay, it's time for me to give you the exercise for the day.
Yeah.
So guys can try this exercise in the system. Please contact your vendor for server access. Or if you want to practice in your company server, that is also fine, because most of you are working with companies. You can go and try in your company. Why to waste some amount unnecessarily for paying for server? So I would give you the exercise here. The exercise is, you need to design a car class with minimal 5 attributes and 2 methods. So that's a bare minimum. Also, you need to have setter and getter method for at least one private attribute. Then write a program to create 2 car objects and call demonstrate the functionality. We should demonstrate the functionality like setting, getting, calling some method of a class by these objects and all that. Any question on this exercise?
No.
No.
Okay. I will be sharing this PPT with you. Okay. And we're going to meet again tomorrow at the same time, or probably because we have some couple of Indian students which are about to join, and one of the students, she's also waiting. She will also join from the PEST time, so it will be convenient even for her to join it 1 hour later. So right now the timing is 6 o'clock. We will be starting at 7 o'clock India time, 7 a.m. India time from tomorrow onwards. Is that fine with you, Ravi? Because you are on CST time, right?
Yeah, for me it's anyway 8:30. Fine.
Yeah. So
For
it will be
EST.
7 a.m. India
Okay.
time.
Okay.
And for me, it will be 9:30 my time, BST.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm extending my working hours just to accommodate all of you guys together, because, once you join in a batch, it will be good to have a fruitful discussion. So many people will ask so many doubts, questions. So it will really help you to even understand the things. So
Okay.
I always recommend you to join in a batch. That will be always good.
Yeah.